Good evening. It's Collateral Damage on KDHX 88.1, your community station. I'm DJ Wilson. Our guest tonight is Todd Swanstrom. He's a professor at University of Missouri St. Louis. And to get that full title, Todd, it's the Des Lee Professor of Community Collaboration and Public Policy Administration.
That's correct. I may not be the best, but I have the longest title, exactly. That's for sure.
Is there some status in that longer titles are better or not?
Well, it sounds impressive, doesn't it? Yeah. Not everybody has that kind of a moniker. But actually, to tell you the truth, I'm very proud to be a Des Lee professor. Des Lee was a very interesting man who contributed to the community. Many people who made a fortune end up taking that fortune with them, right, or wasting it. And he invested it in the community. He's funded something like 30 professorships around the region, and so I'm very proud of that title, actually. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Des before he passed away, and he was a man of infinite curiosity, and I had a lot of respect for him.
Didn't he get his money initially from hangers?
That's right. Well, it wasn't quite hangers.
Well,
it was that's the way I put it sometimes. But his co-worker invented the thing that in the 40s that you would put pants on before you had permanent press slacks. You would put them on this hanger, and that would put the crease in as they dried, right? So you would create the crease. And I remember seeing these when I was young, and that was the first product they manufactured here in St. Louis down by the riverfront. And then they expanded, and he was a kind of inventor. He invented other, like hangers that hang one from the other, right, to get more volume. And so he made a fortune out of hangers and accessories and other things like that. And then he sold it about 10 or 12 years near the end of his life, and I think got about $100 million and proceeded to invest most of that in the community. And
that was back when creases were important in pants, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They still are for some of us.
Yeah, I guess. Not me, though. And Des Lee's grandson is David Lee, the player for the New York Knicks.
He's quite the player. In fact, I think he was on the All-Star squad this
He was.
This past year. And he's not only a great defender now, but he's a scorer. So
he's a free agent too, I think. Anyway, we're going to talk tonight about urban problems, urban situations, and urban issues. And one of the things that was out in the last few weeks, maybe the last month or so, the Brookings Institute had one of their. There's always these things on how they rate cities and group cities and talk about the metropolitan growth, and it's on the Brookings website. And we don't need to go into any detail on that. But one of the things I thought was kind of telling about that. You seem like there's some people that are like the Chamber of Commerce types are always boosting St. Louis or wherever they live beyond reason. But then there's also some who like criticize it beyond reason too. And in this Brookings study, or whatever you want to call it, work, they grouped cities in 4 different categories. And the 4th category was sort of like the most, I don't know what you would call it, unpleasant, was sort of the Clevelands, Detroits, the Buffaloes, the Youngstown, Ohio, et cetera. Then there was a group called the Skilled Anchor Group, and that was St. Louis was in there. And basically they referred to it as having a somewhat skilled workforce, and that the city wasn't shrinking, and it was mostly a positive assessment.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think we tend in St. Louis to see the glasses half full instead of half empty. It's kind of a tradition, I think, in St. Louis for looking at it negatively. But in the last few years, as somebody who observes these things and travels around the country, I took a trip to Detroit a few months ago to give a talk. And you see that St. Louis is no longer in just that shrinking industrial city category, that for example, in many of these regions, the regional population is declining. Our regional population is growing, modestly but growing. And the central cities of many of these regions, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, these others, is shrinking fairly rapidly still. We think, and we won't know for sure until the 2010 census, but we think the population of the city of St. Louis has stabilized. Put that in the context, by the way, of 500,000 people having left the city, right? My favorite factoid is, St. Louis lost 500,000 people in the second half of the 20th century, going from 850,000 to 350,000. But I think we see these signs of strength. We have the eds and the meds here, as they call them, right? The big educational institutions, the big medical facilities, which are anchors. Many of these are located in the city. Wash U and St. Louis University are located in the city. UMSL's in the inner ring suburbs. And these are sort of anchors. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of revitalization occurring across the city. My concern increasingly is not so much the central city. I think the city, which has these incredible assets and these jewels like Forest Park, is going to grow, but the inner-ring suburbs are having more problems. So anyway, I think we see a metropolitan area and a central city that is showing some strengths. And, of course, this is in the context of all these demographic shifts and cultural shifts that are making central cities more viable. When you have more empty nesters, more older people, more single households. So cities are doing better, and St. Louis is one of those cities. We're not a Boston or a Seattle,
right.
But we're also not a Detroit or a Cleveland.
And we don't have that boom and bust cycle that a Phoenix or Atlanta or some of these other places might have, which is good and bad news.
Yeah, no, I think that's basically good news.
Right.
We didn't have that explosion in housing prices. I've done a lot of research on foreclosures, and I've got in the report I recently issued to the National League of Cities, 6 metropolitan areas, and St. Louis was one of them. And we fit in the kind of non-bubble metro area, right? We saw increases, a run-up in housing prices, but nothing like a Phoenix or a Las Vegas or a Tampa or those kinds of places. So as a result, we didn't have the bursting of the bubble. And that bursting of the bubble has been very painful for those metro areas. So we've seen a decline in housing prices, but relatively modest. We have a foreclosure problem in St. Louis, but it's not of the magnitude, once again, of a Las Vegas or the Inland Empire in California. What the problem here, of course, is it's concentrated in certain neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods have been hard hit. So I don't want to minimize it,
right.
But we simply didn't have that boom and bust, and that's left us a little stronger, I think, coming out of this recession.
Now, one of the things St. Louis is often known for, in mostly a negative way, I think, is the fragmentation in terms of the 92 municipalities in the county, St. Louis County, the 26 school districts, the 800 or so districts of municipal districts, of fire districts and ambulance districts and sewer districts and everything else. And so that sort of leads at least to the perception that they're riding off in all different directions. Now, one of the things that just happened since you've last been on was Metro, the Prop A thing passed.
Right.
Now, it seems, at least on the surface, that was an encouraging thing and somewhat of a reversal of prior behavior, because the same Prop M in 2008, was it, or what, a year and a half ago, failed, and because of that, Metro had to cut back on a service, et cetera, and then they programmed this Prop A to be on the ballot, and it passed pretty easily. Not easily, but it passed well.
Passed with 63% of the vote, which frankly shocked most of us.
Right.
We figured if it was going to pass, it was barely going to pass.
Because that was in St. Louis County it passed.
That's St. Louis County, that's right. And the encouraging sign, I think, is that if you looked at the vote in 2008, voters outside 270 voted against Prop M, which was the tax to bolster public transit in St. Louis County. Inside 270, they generally voted for it. This time there was a shift, and you saw widespread support across the area. And out in Chesterfield, where I think it had failed rather dramatically in 2008, it lost, I think it was 51 to 49 this time. So it was basically very close. Yeah, you can survive that. And so if you look at a map of the areas where it got 50% or more of the vote, what you see is a spread of that all over the county in this recent. And I think it was a very encouraging campaign, because what happened is, instead of a sort of top-down campaign managed by consultants and the various civic groups didn't feel a part of it, this time in the Prop A, I think the churches, the unions, the community groups felt like they were more a central part of the campaign.